right, well, it is officially 2 o'clock. We have a number of people here. We do have more that registered who have not popped in yet, but hopefully if anyone else does join us, they can kind of catch up. And I know I heard from a few people who registered who let me know they wouldn't actually be able to attend live, but wanted to make sure they got the recording. So on that note, I will say that my intention is to get this recording processed and sent out to everybody who registered. I'll also post it in Basecamp, but the registration just ensures that you definitely get that link rather than the potential to miss it if it comes through Basecamp. So hopefully everybody who did register gets a chance to get the recording. So feel free to share it with colleagues who weren't able to come, or if there's anything that you were a little bit unclear about and wanted to go back and rewatch, you'll have access to it. So I'll get that out as soon as I've had a chance to fully process it. It might take a day or two, depending on how long it is and how complicated the captions are. But let's go ahead and get started. Thank you for being here. Samantha O'Connor. I'm the Cardinal Training Specialist, and today we're going to be talking about Evergreen reports. We got a huge number of respondents to our annual staff survey last year who indicated that reporting was the biggest thing that they were confused by in Evergreen. So this year, my plan is to offer a variety of different report training webinars. So this will be the first of those. And this one's really going to be focused on kind of that 101 level information. This is where we'll talk about getting reports set up. If you've never done a report before, you'll learn how to get everything in your account ready for reporting. We'll talk about navigating the centralized reports templates and a few other basics. So the agenda for today, we're going to start by setting up a reports account. And we'll talk a little bit about the different options available. We'll talk about how the reporter actually does what it's doing, and kind of look at a little bit of the underlying structure. I do think that understanding what the reporter is doing is helpful for ensuring that when you're setting up a report or editing an existing report, you kind of know what it is that you're trying to do. It helps to reduce the amount of mistakes and reports that don't run and things like that. We'll talk about navigating the centralized reports templates so that we have a huge number of reports that either we at Cardinal have created or other libraries in Cardinal have created and shared widely. And we've gathered all those together into a centralized folder that anybody who has access to Evergreen does have access to these templates. And we'll talk about how you can navigate those and how you can actually use them to create your own reports. We'll talk about the process of both cloning those templates and then editing them if you want to make small tweaks. We won't go into great detail on editing. We'll just talk about the basics. And then we'll talk about running the reports themselves off of those templates and setting up a recurrent schedule. And then hopefully, if there's any time left, we'll have time for questions. Keep in mind that this is the first of several sessions. So, some of these things we may not go into great depth on. I'm happy to answer questions within the context of today's session. But in terms of going into more depth on some of these topics, that'll come in later sessions as well. So just keep an eye out for those. I'll try to do one basically every other month for the rest of this fiscal year. So let's start by talking about setting up a reports account. There are basically two different ways that you can do this. You can do a generic reports account, or you can do reports off of your individual login account. A generic account is very similar to what a lot of our libraries do with their circulation accounts, where they have kind of just a generic login that all circulators use. And that is an option for reports as well. Reports can also be run off of anybody's individual login account. So if you have an Evergreen account, you can run reports off of that account. You're already set up to do so. There are pros and cons to both of those account types. So let's talk first about the concept of a generic account, because that is not the one that is most commonly used, but it is one that I recommend. So when using a generic account, one of the key elements, one of the key sort of positive aspects of that generic account is that it can be shared. So it's not necessarily linked to a single individual, and therefore, anybody who needs reports, anybody who runs reports has access to sort of the same pool of templates. You might have people from multiple different departments who all run reports, who can all kind of go into the same account and then run their reports off of that account. This is especially useful because it means that that account will not be impacted by retirement or resignation. One of the things that happens fairly often is in a library where maybe one person has been running all the reports and they've set them up to recur, and there's really, they don't touch them very often. People forget when that person quits or retires, people forget that that's where the reports were coming from. And they don't realize it until the first month after that account has been deactivated, when suddenly they don't get their reports. And then they contact us and we scramble around to try to get them their recurrence set back up and to try to clone the reports into the new person's account and take care of all of that. But it's possible that some data will fall through the cracks in that process. So it definitely impacts your ability to get your data on a regular basis, and sometimes your ability to get the data that you actually need in total. If you have one of those situations where a single person runs the reports and they retire or quit, it can really impact your reporting process. So a generic account kind of mitigates that. Of course, there are some disadvantages to this type of account as well, because there may not be one person in charge of it. And as a result of that, issues with reports may be harder to address. There may be a lack of accountability that could make it harder to make needed upgrades. Password changes can be a problem. People forgetting the password can be a problem. People changing the password and not letting other people who need access to that account, that can be a problem too. So by having that kind of lack of single accountability, there are issues that arise by that. Of course, when staff do leave, if they're the ones who've been running the generic account, it may be forgotten that the person who's running that account has left. And so handing off that responsibility may sort of fall through the cracks, which will only become apparent when a recurring report fails to run as expected, or there are issues that need to be updated or something like that. So there are some negatives to having this sort of generic account type. The individual account, which is just the regular login account that any Evergreen user has, does make up for these potential issues by tying all the reports to a distinct individual who is responsible for the account, and therefore responsible for the reports themselves. So it's a lot easier to sort of keep track of reports, to keep track of things that need to change, to understand who's made changes. There's basically a default point of contact when there's an issue, and that's a lot easier to manage. However, of course, it's on balance with what happens if that individual leaves. If you choose to use individual accounts, it is really important that the SLAM at the library, is aware of who is running reports and which reports are being run, so that if somebody does retire or quit, then those reports can be dealt with prior to that first month after that person's departure, and they can be cloned and sort of reset to run properly in the new person's account. So if you choose to use individual accounts, which is the majority of our libraries, I just recommend that the SLAM is very aware of reporting and what that looks like, so that if somebody does leave, they're prepared to clone reports into new accounts. And there's a lot of information in our knowledge books about how to do that. Overall, when we're talking about library-wide, regularly recurring reports, those big data reports that you need on a regular basis, I definitely think that a generic reports account is a useful idea, and something that I think you should consider if you have not yet really set up all your reports, or if you're in a point of transition where maybe you're the person who's been running reports is leaving anyway. moving those reports into a generic reports account might be a good idea. So let's talk next about the concept of how the reporter is structured within Evergreen. There are basically three different points at which you are working with the reporter. There's the template, the report itself, and the output. And this can be a little bit confusing because we sort of refer to all of them as reports, even though only one of them is actually called a report. And the one that is actually called a report is actually the one you probably touch the least. But basically a template is where you determine what data is going to show up in the report that you run. You select the displays that you're going to have coming up in your report. You select the data points that you want to filter on. You determine how those will display, and you determine how the filters will limit. So the template is where you kind of create the structure of the data that you want. You tell Evergreen what data you're going to be pulling. The report is where you actually set the filter data. So if in your template you've said that you have a circulation date range is the data point that you want to make sure is included in the report, then when you go into the report itself, you say what that date range is. So that's when you give the parameters for the data you'll be filtering. You'll also create the name for your output. You'll determine where that output will go. You'll determine when it will run. And if you're doing a recurring report, this is where you set up your recurrence. And then finally, the output is the actual data that you view after the report has run. And this is basically, this can come in a couple of different ways. You can download an Excel spreadsheet. You can also view it directly in your browser window. I generally recommend doing both of those. And it's also where you can get data about anything that went wrong. So if the report is not showing the information you expect it to, or if it's completely empty and you know it shouldn't be, there is a lot of debugging information that doesn't maybe make sense to look at, but it's what you can send to us at Cardinal to try to figure out what went wrong. So that's one of the other types of output to kind of keep an eye out for. So that's kind of the basic underlying information about getting set up. Let's talk about what setup actually looks like now. So the first step in setting up reports for your account or for your library's generic account is to create subfolders. Any of you who are already working with reports will have already done this step. You'll need at least one subfolder for each different piece of the report puzzle. So you'll need a subfolder for templates, for reports, and for your output. And let's go ahead and do that. And when we do it, we're also going to set our sharing levels. So we're going to talk about basically, are these reports that only you want to be able to see the templates and reports set up for, or are these reports that you're willing to share with other people within your system or with Cardinal as a whole? So let's go into Evergreen, and I'm actually going to log out of the account I'm in because we're going to start from absolute scratch. So I've created a report specifically, or an account specifically for this training. So we are going to navigate to the reporter. I'm going to go over here to the administration menu and come down to reports. If you have not had your splash page kind of redesigned to not have the reports link, most of you will have the reports link here under the administration box as well. But if your library has customized your splash page and that reports link is no longer on the splash page, you can get it always from the administration menu. So I'm going to come here to administration and reports. And I am going to come over here to this top box on the left. This is where my folders are. So later on, we're going to be coming down into the shared folders, but for now, we're going to start by kind of looking at the My Folders section. And you'll see that rather than having these kind of yellow folder icons, we have a white just page icon. And that's telling me that I don't have any subfolders available. So I am going to start by creating subfolders for my templates, reports, and outputs. I'll start by clicking on templates, and this immediately asks me what I want to do, how I want to create this subfolder. So I'm going to give it a name. And then I can set my sharing. So I can share or not. That's my first step of sharing. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and click share. That way, those of you who are attending this or watching it afterwards, you can actually go into the shared folders down here. You can locate these folders that I'm going to be creating today, and you can actually work off of the reports that we're going to create together. So if you wanted to kind of come back and take a closer look at those, you'll be able to. So I'm going to set it at sharing. And now I have to set the level that I'm sharing. So I'm going to, in this share with dropdown, I can choose my branch, I can choose my system, or I can choose all of NC Cardinal. So in this case, I'm going to choose all of NC Cardinal because I do want people to be able to come back and take a look at these. However, if you're talking about reports that are specifically for your library, you may not necessarily want to share those widely, but you may want to go ahead and share them with your entire system or your branch, depending on what your needs are. So I'm going to set that at NC Cardinal, and I'm going to create my subfolder, and I get a message that that has succeeded. So now I have that little white page icon has turned into the folder icon, and if I click this arrow next to it, then I see the subfolder I've just created. Now, if I click the templates link again, I can create a second subfolder, or I can click training reports and I can create, I can go ahead and start creating templates. I can go ahead and start, once I have templates, working off of those templates. If I did want to create a subfolder to this subfolder, I can do that up here under Manage Folder, where I can change the folder name, I can delete it, I can change the sharing settings, or I can create a new subfolder. So I do have a lot of options for what I can do with this subfolder after having created it. I'm going to go ahead and just sort of repeat the same steps for both reports and output now. So templates, that's where the underlying templates that I'll use to create the structure for my reports, that's where those will save. Now I'm going to select or create my subfolder for my reports, and that's where I'm going to save the information that I'll be using to actually set up the reports themselves. So within here, I'm going to do the same thing because the last folder I created, I called training reports. Evergreen has actually saved that for me. It's kind of sticky. And so I'm just going to go ahead and name my report subfolder training reports as well. Same sharing settings. I do have to change this up to NC Cardinal simply because, or I'm not really sure why Evergreen has the sharing, share this folder and the folder name sticky, but it does not have the share with level sticky. That's If somebody can explain that to me, I'd be interested in knowing what the answer to that is. But I've gone ahead and changed it to NC Cardinal, and I'll create my subfolder, and that action has succeeded. And then I'll do the same thing for my output. So again, training reports is already in there, and my sharing has been set to share. I just have to change the level to which I am sharing it. So I'll choose NC Cardinal and create subfolder. And now I've created all of the subfolders that I need. So as I said, any of you who are already working with reports, this is a step you've already taken. But for those of you who are brand new to reports, this will be the first thing that you'll need to do. All right, so that was our initial setup. So next we're going to go on to talk about kind of how the reporter works and how it's pulling data. I'm not going to go into great detail on this. We're not going to get super technical, but we're just going to talk a little bit about the general concept. I will let you know that because this is a webinar style, you don't have the ability to unmute yourself directly, but if you do have any questions that you'd like to bring up, please go ahead and put them in the chat. So if anyone does have any questions about what we've just discussed, please feel free to put those in the chat. And if it's one of those things that you kind of need to go back and forth with the conversation on, just let me know in the chat and I can unmute you and then you'll be able to speak. So feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. So we're going to talk about the underlying structure of the reporter. And the main thing that we're going to talk about is the concept of columns and rows. So basically, the reporter is pulling information from the underlying Evergreen database. Every piece of information that goes into Evergreen, whether that is a bibliographic record, a copy of a book on a record, a circulation instance, patron, anything like that is stored in our Evergreen database. And the reporter allows you to pull that stuff up in a way that's useful. So the first thing that you need to do when pulling it up is basically determine what it is you want to see, because there's a lot of data in that underlying database. And so rather than sort of pulling everything in a specific category up, one of the things that you're doing with the reporter is specifying exactly what you want to see from within that category. And I like to think of this as though the database is basically a gigantic spreadsheet. And rather than looking at the whole spreadsheet, you're using the reporter to say the specific columns from that spreadsheet you want to see, and then which data rows within those columns you want to see. So let's actually take a look at that in a spreadsheet. So I'm going to share, I believe I'm sharing my Excel screen now, yeah. So this is obviously a very fake set of patron data, but this is a list of patrons. This is a list of patrons, and the concept that I'm going for here is that this is the full data set. Obviously, when we're talking about patron data, we have significantly more data points than this, but I didn't want to spend hours and hours putting this together. So what we're looking at is pretending that our data set in its entirety is a barcode, a first name, a last name, a home library, and a date of birth. And if I were to pull up this entire data set, I could kind of go through it and figure out, well, who are the people that I'm looking for? Is there a specific home library I'd like to focus on? Is there a specific date of birth I'd like to focus on? And I could find those individually. And in this particular case, I've got 29 entries, so it wouldn't be that bad. In reality, you're going to have thousands and in some cases millions. So that would be just inconceivably difficult and time consuming to work with. So you're going to use the reporter to pull up pieces of this data. So the first thing that you would do in using the reporter is determine which spreadsheet, what we would call a table, you actually want to pull from. And this is what, when you're setting up a template, this is your core source. The core source is the table of data that you are working from. So in this case, we might say that this is a patron core source. So our data set is fully visible here. But the first thing that I'd want to do after determining which data set I'm pulling from is to figure out which columns I want to look at. I may not want to look at all, in this case, 5, but in reality at something like 30 different columns that are available of data points for a patron. So in order to do that, the first thing that I want to do is select my display fields. That's what we call these in the reporter. And they basically refer to the different columns or the different categories of data points. So let's say that I only want to see the barcode in the home library of my patrons. I would select those 2 display fields. And then if I were to run that report with no filters, I would get the full data set, but only those 2 columns showing up. Of course, in most cases, we don't want to run a report with no filters. We have a specific slice of the data that we're interested in. So after setting your display fields, you'll want to set your filters. So in this case, I might say that I want the barcode in the home library of the patrons in the data set, but I only want to see patrons whose home library is Sunnydale campus. And once I've set that, then the final report that I get is going to give me only the 2 columns or display fields that I've selected, as well as only the patrons who have the data point within column B that fits my filter. So I've determined that I have a filter that I'd like, which is home library. That's what I'll be filtering on. And I've told the reporter that the parameter of that filter is Sunnydale campus. And as a result, I only get this very small slice of the overall data set. And that's basically what we're doing with the reporter. We're determining the columns that we want to see, and we're determining which of those columns we'll be filtering on, and then what that filter looks like in order to get a subset of data from the larger data set. This is maybe a little bit of a too obvious point to go into. You know, it might be pretty intuitive to most of you, but I do think it's helpful to kind of think about it in this step-by-step way, because when you're actually in the reporter and you're creating a template or editing an existing template, understanding this concept of display fields as columns and filters as rows can help you determine maybe why a filter isn't working as you're expecting, or why you can't get certain columns to appear in your final product. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we're actually creating a report later on. So basically, all of this translates into the reporter in terms of your core source, your display fields, your filters, and your parameters. So your core source is the actual spreadsheet or table that you're pulling your data from. This is where all the data lives. The categories of data in the spreadsheet, or the columns, are going to be your display fields. The categories that you'll be using to determine which data points to include are your filters. And the specific information included in those data points to show in the final output are your parameters. So we'll be kind of coming back to this vocabulary over and over again. But I think that this is kind of, this gets you started, is understanding that concept. So let's take a look at an actual template. And we don't have an actual template yet because this is a brand new account, but we're going to create, sort of create one. So I'm going to click on create a new template for this folder, and this will bring me into a blank template. So up here, I'll put in my template name. And I can add additional documentation. I can add the description, and I definitely recommend that you always add a description when you're putting this together. But then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to choose my core source. Remember, this is the table or the data set that I'm selecting from. So in this case, I'm going to come down here to the ILS user. And then I'm going to select my display field. So you'll see in this bottom pane that display fields is the tab that's highlighted. So I'm going to choose the columns that I'd like to appear in my final output. In order to do that, I can click just on ILS user, and this will bring up all of the available columns within this data set. Now, one thing that the reporter does, and this is where it starts to get a little tricky, is that it allows you to link between data sets. So if all of the information I need is in this ILS user data set, great. I don't need to go any further. But sometimes I might need something a little bit more, like, for example, library card information and patron information are actually stored in two different data sets or spreadsheets. So I might need to, instead of getting library card information from the ILS user spreadsheet, I might need to actually click on this arrow here to see what other spreadsheets I can link to, and then come down here to current library card in order to get my actual patron barcode. So that gets a little bit tricky, but for the most part, start at your core source. Start at the top level here and pull in whatever you can for your display fields. If something that you need, such as current library card, has this little link icon next to it, it means that you need to go a step deeper. And so all you have to do, if you see that link icon for a data point that you'd like to include, is to click on the arrow next to the core source to open up all of the tables that this is linked to, and then find that data point within this list. So I'd find current library card, and then I have all of the data points that are available within current library card. So I could put in my barcode, and then I can come back up here to the ILS user core source or original table, and I could do things like put in the daytime phone number and the date of birth and the home library. So I can do all of those and put them down here in my display field list. We'll get into a little bit more detail about what I did here with the transform later on, but the first step is understanding that you're pulling your core source, that you're pulling your data categories from this core source, which is the actual table where the data is stored, and then you're choosing which categories you'd like to show up here in the source path. Does that make sense to everybody? If anybody's confused, please go ahead and raise your hand or let me know in the chat. All right. Well, the next step is, of course, the filters. So we've talked about the core source, and we've talked about the display field. The next thing that we want to talk about is the filters themselves. So we know which columns we want to see. Now we want to tell the reporter how we will be filtering the specific data that shows up in those columns. So for this one, let me unhighlight these that I've selected. One of the key ones that you'll almost always use is home library. So I'm going to go ahead and add that as my filter. So I'll put that here. And now basically I've said that from the table that is ILS user, I would like to link to the table that is the card, the current library card, in order to get the barcode data. And I would like to pull up the following categories. I would like to include the categories for the daytime phone number, the date of birth, and the home library. Those are the only columns that will show up in my output from what is probably something like 30 different columns that I could choose from. Additionally, I'm going to later on, when I'm setting up my report to run, I'm going to determine which libraries I actually want to see this data from. If I were to run it just like this, I would see all of these fields for every single patron on every single library in Cardinal, which would be a lot. So I've set up a filter that will allow me to narrow that down to only my library. However, I haven't actually told it that which library to narrow that down to yet. I've only said that library is where the narrowing will happen because the filter gets set in a different step. This is my template. I'm going to save this template. And then I'm going to come to my templates folder and my training reports subfolder. And I'm going to actually come to the training template that I've just created and check that box. And then I'm going to create a new report from selected template. And this is where I set my filter. So I have basically told the reporter what I'll be filtering on. This is where I'll be saying what that filter looks like. So I'll start by giving my report a name. At this point, I've created a template, which is the underlying structure for my report. Now I'm running the actual report. So I'm going to give it a name. In this case, the name is the same as the template. That's not always going to be the case. You can name it kind of whatever you want. I do have to choose where within the reports subfolders I have available I will be saving this. Of course, I only have one available, and that's the training reports subfolder that I've just created. So I'm going to select that. And then I'm going to come down here, and this is where I set my actual filter. I'm going to have basically an option for any filter that I had created in my template to set the parameters of that filter there. So in this case, my filter is the home library of the user. And now I'm going to say that PAC will be the actual information that I'm going to use to filter on. So I've selected that. And I don't want it to be recurring. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So I'm going to leave all of this blank. However, I'm going to set my output options to Excel and HTML. I'm going to turn off bar chart. You can do that every time because the bar chart almost never works. And even when it does, it's not a very good one. So I would just suggest turning that off every time, but I would suggest using both HTML and Excel Excel is where you'll be able to actually work with that data, send it to other people, that type of thing. HTML will allow you to check to make sure that everything worked properly before downloading that Excel file. Finally, I do need to choose a folder to store the report output. So in this case, I'm going to choose the training reports, which is, again, the only option I have because it's the only subfolder I've actually created. I've also, my email address is set up here to, so this is where this report will be emailed. And I think that's set at the workstation level, which is why this was happening automatically, even though this is a brand new account that's never run a report before, because this workstation has run reports and those reports go here. Go ahead and put in your email address if that's blank. And then I'll save my report. And the process of saving the report will generally cause it to run unless you have asked it to run at a later date. So in this case, I've got run as soon as possible checked. So it's going to run automatically upon saving. If I had asked it to run at a later date, then it would wait until that point to run. I'll click OK. And now I just need my output. Now I can go and work and do other things and wait to be emailed for the output. And that's what most people do. But for the purposes of this training, I will show you where you would find it if you wanted to go directly to it. So I'll go to the output subfolder that we created, the training report subfolder, and I can see that it's already run. If it had not run yet, it would be up here in pending items. This is a really simple report, so it ran very quickly. And I can go ahead and check the box next to it down here under completed items. And from this drop down, I can choose view report output and submit. And then I have three options. I have the tabular output, the Excel output, and the debugging info. Debugging info, if something about this report was not correct. This is, as I said, this doesn't mean much, sort of dehumanize, but if you send this to us at Cardinal, we could actually run this in the database directly and try to understand what's going on under sort of behind the scenes. In this case, though, I'm going to look at the tabular output. It's going to be fairly large. I'm going to let that run in the background. But overall, this is where I would go to actually check my output to see if it was correct. So while that opens, it's really big. We'll move on. Are there any questions before we move on? So let's see, there are some questions in the chat. Let me take a look. So Matthew asked about difference between selecting similar sounding fields, and the example he gave was ILS user, current library card, raw data, and ILS user, current library card, barcode, raw data. So really, those are two separate fields in the sense that, let me go back in and show you. Unfortunately, I can't edit the existing template, but I will clone it. We'll talk about cloning in a moment. So if I'm under ILS user and current library card, I can't do anything with this because this linked icon tells me that it doesn't exist here. I would have to go under ILS user, current library card, and then choose barcode. And this is an actual field. Current library card is not an actual field. So this isn't an actual existing column within this table. It is a place where this table links to a different table. So it tells me that that link exists. And so if I wanted to link to it, I can. But I couldn't actually include this in my output. If I tried to, it wouldn't work. So I would need to go to ILS user, current library card, barcode, to get an actual displayable field. Matthew also has a second example. The core source column has ILS user, current library card, as opposed to just ILS user. Yes. So basically what happened is that I had linked to a second table. So I had my ILS user, and then my current library card, and then barcode, and then I added it, which means that showing, there we go. Which means that when I have, when it shows up down here in the source path, it's showing me I started at ILS user. That's my core source. That's the original table. I then moved to current library card, which is a completely different table. It's not another field within this existing table. It's a different table. So I'm sort of going from one, it's showing me the path I used to get to the table that I actually pull that column from. Yes. If you see a linked icon, you need to go not to that field, but to that table to obtain that information. So if you see in, you know, in ILS user, you see a link icon, then you need to go underneath ILS user to the subtable. Not really a subtable, it's a separate table, but it is a table that is linked to ILS user. And from there, you can select categories that you'd like to include. Okay. All right, so let's go on and let's talk about the centralized reports templates. So the centralized reports templates exist within the reporter, and you can get to them under the shared folders. So I'll show you how to get to them here, but then I'll also show you the knowledge book for them. So under shared folders, so the second box here, I would go under templates and I would select admin. And then I'd click on the arrow next to admin to open it up. And occasionally some Cardinal team members will maybe create a report for people that, from their own report account and share it. And so that's why you'll sometimes see Cardinal people's folders here. So if somebody has created a report specifically for you and told you to find it underneath their folder, that would be where you would go to find it. But the main thing you'll be looking for here is the centralized reports template right here. So I'll click on this arrow to open it up, and you'll see we have a number of different categories, acquisitions, billing and payment, all the way down here to patron. So you can come in here and you can go under, each of them have one folder for counts and one for lists, and you can find what you're looking for. And I'll show you, just as an example, one of them. So we have two different count reports or templates for billing and payment. However, I would recommend that if you are trying to find a template for something you're trying to do, this is not the best way to do it. Instead, I would recommend going into the knowledge books. So under the reports knowledge book, in the appendixes, Appendix F is where you'll find all of these listed out. So they're categorized in the same way, but you have the ability also to do like a find options. You could Control F and try to find stuff about billing. And this will allow you to kind of come down and not just search by the name, but also see what's being displayed, what's being filtered, a full description of the template. You can also see how old it is. Sometimes the older reports are not going to be quite as functional as newer ones. So, you know, if that's something that you're seeing that it's an older report, then it's possible that may not be the best choice for you. But this allows you to kind of browse through the available centralized templates to select the one that you want. And once you've found one that you like, you know where to find it because it tells you which folder it's in. Or you could also take the name of it and then you could search for it up here in this search templates query. This is not always super functional, so it may not always work, but it's definitely worth a shot. Yeah, I don't think it worked in this particular case. Oh, it did. So then once I've selected the template that I'd want to use, either by finding it directly in here or by finding it in the appendix and then searching for it within the reporter, then I can work with that template. So a couple of things to note about the centralized templates in the reporter. Basically, there are a number of different categories available. And for each category, you have both a list and a count. A list is going to be an output type that is a full list of every data point within that report. Account will be one where it gives a count. So an example of this might be a list of circulations by month. You'll get a list of every single circulation that happened over the course of the month that you filter to. Account would give you how many circulations, but you won't see a list of the individual ones. So you'd see that there were maybe 5,380 circulations, but you won't see the individual circulations that go into that count. So let's take a look at some of the things that are available in here. Let's go into the circulation templates. So I'm going to go in and look at the counts for circulation templates. And you'll see that my default output is limited to 10. So I'm only seeing 10 of the possible templates that are available. I would recommend that you always switch this to all. The main reason for that is that it will alphabetize them entirely when it's in all, but it does not actually alphabetize them correctly if you have it limited to just 10 or 25 or anything. So I would recommend generally switching this to all, not only because then you see everything, but also because then it's organized. And from here, I can choose a variety of different counts for circulation. You'll see that a lot of these are very similar. So we might have circulations monthly by CircMod and permission group. And then we also have circulations monthly by CircMod with stat counts. So we have basically a lot of different ways that you can sort of look at the same data. One of the things that we ask you to do, not just ask, but actually require you to do, is to clone any of these reports that you intend to use. So if you find a report that you wanted to use, and let's say that we wanted to do this count circulations monthly by CircMod and permission group, you could choose this and you could come up to the top and you could create a new report from that template. And you could, even though this template is saved in the shared folders for admin, you could save a report of it in your own account. Please don't do that. And the main reason that we ask you not to do that is because if we go in and try to clean things up, if we edit that report to update it, to include new fields, or to tweak it slightly because we've discovered an error in it, we won't be able to do that if somebody has a report that is attached to that template. So what we ask you to do is that anytime you are running reports off of one of the centralized report templates, you clone it to your own account. So let's talk a little bit about cloning, and then I will show you how to do it. So basically, when we talk about cloning, we're talking about that in contrast to creating a template. So when you create a template, you're building it yourself from scratch and you're saving it to your account. You can share it if your sharing settings are set to share, but it lives in your account. You are the owner of it. Cloning is when you take a pre-existing template, whether it's one of the centralized reports templates that we've created or something that a Cardinal team member creates for you, or something you're borrowing from another library. It's a pre-existing template that has already been put together, but you are saving a copy of that template to your account. That allows you to make edits to it if you need. If there's one column that you'd like to include that wasn't in the original, or you'd like to remove something, you can do that. Additionally, it allows you to then run those reports off of your account without causing any problems down the line if somebody wants to make changes to that original template. So the main reason that we ask you to clone rather than to work off of the centralized reports templates is so that you will not cause problems if we do try to clean things up in the future. So let's do that clone very quickly. So I'm in the reporter and I've selected the template from the centralized report template that I'd like to clone. And I'm just going to come up here to the top under clone selected template. So I'm going to select that from this dropdown and click submit. And now I have to determine where I'd like to save this template within my account. So currently this is in the admin account. I'm going to move it here into my reporter training account. So I'm going to select the only folder option I have, which is training reports. That's that template folder we created at the beginning. And I'll click select folder. And it's going to pop me directly into the template. So this is what we were looking at a few minutes ago when we were talking about creating one from scratch. Now, the majority of the time, you will not be creating templates from scratch. You'll be working off of a cloned version of an existing template. So this is a slightly more common scenario of what you'll be looking at. Rather than starting at that blank page, you'll see that we've already got a core source and it's circulation. And if we come down here, we can see all of the different display fields that have been developed. Now, I have the ability to make changes. I could change simply the title, and I would recommend that you generally do that because anytime you clone a report, you do get this note that it's cloned here. And if you clone off of a clone off of a clone, then you just keep getting the word clone repeated over and over again. One thing that I do recommend that you do is that when you're testing things out and you're not sure something's going to be the final version, I will often put in a number designating which version, which attempt this is. And I have definitely gotten up into the teens with this number before. So, you know, sometimes it's very much a trial and error. You can also add information to the template description. So in this case, our standard is that our template description will let you know which source we're pulling from, which data table, which columns will appear in the display, and what filters are set up. You can keep that exactly as it is and then just add information like pulled from centralized reports template, if that is helpful for you. You can also get rid of it completely and put in your own information here. If you have documentation that you keep somewhere online for this, I'm not sure how common that is, but if that is something that you do, you can add that documentation here. If there's documentation in the knowledge books that will help you when working with this report, you can also put that here. And then you can make additional edits by coming down here and changing things like your column labels. So if I wanted to change checkout date to circulation date, I could right click and choose change column label from the menu that pops up. And I could just change checkout date to circulation date and click OK. And now when I get my output, the actual spreadsheet that I download for Excel, that column will be labeled circulation date. And this is really helpful because oftentimes when you are adding a new display field, that display field may not be terribly descriptive. So let's see if I can get a good example here. These are all very descriptive. For the most part, everything I'm seeing here is fairly descriptive, but potentially you could find something that just has name or ID. And so you might want to make that more descriptive as you're moving through. For example, I could put in first name here and decide that what I really need to see is patron first name. And so I can change those to make them as descriptive as needed. Before we move on, I want to talk a little bit about what the next steps are before we actually apply them, because they're a little confusing. And I think this is where people get the most confused with the reporter. So this is the part where most people said that they got lost in our survey. So I wanted to make sure that we really dig into this. Basically, transforms are how the data is processed when it's retrieved from the database. And for many things, you don't need to make any changes to this. So there are a number of different transforms available. You can get a raw data, and that's just exactly how something appears in the database. It is the exact way that that data is stored. That's what will be spit out in your report. And in many cases, this is all you need. But there are some times that you want to apply a different transform. So one of the things that you'll see often as a transform is the date. So when the database stores a piece of information like a circulation transaction, it puts a timestamp on it. If you choose raw data for that data point, you will get that full timestamp, which means that you'll get the exact down to the second that something happened. That may be complicated if you're trying to get counts. It may be complicated if you're going to be trying to do grouping later on. So you might want to change that transform to date, and that's going to get rid of that timestamp and just put the general date that that transaction happened. So your output will show, October 10th, 2023, not October 10th, 2023 at 4:53 and 22 seconds in the afternoon or something like that. You're going to get only the sort of the relevant piece of information that you want from that data point. You can also make that even more generic by doing it a year plus month. And this is really helpful when you're looking at, just trying to get a general idea of maybe how circulation changes over the course of the year, and you just want to see it kind of month to month. Some other things that you can do, there are some pieces of data that are stored within the database in all uppercase. You might want to change that in your output to lowercase. And vice versa, there are some things that, they're stored in lowercase within the database, but you would like to see it in uppercase in your output. Substring is a little bit complicated. Not a lot of people are going to need that, but it allows you to sort of choose a single part of a larger string of data. So, if you are looking at patrons whose home library is within Henderson, and you want both Henderson Outreach and Henderson Main, and you don't care which one, but you want both of those included, then you could do a substring of just Henderson, and that's going to bring up anybody that has Henderson appearing in their home library, rather than worrying about that full piece of data. It's kind of similar to the date concept, except it's working with alphanumeric data rather than a timestamp. It allows you to kind of pull out only a portion of what is included in the full data set. First continuous non-space string, that's getting a little bit into the weeds, I think. I'm not sure how many people use that. It's similar to the substring, but it allows you to maybe pull out the first word of a multi-word data point. Count is one of the most common ones that you'll use with a transform. That's what allows you to get a count. So if you are looking at getting a circulation count, you would put in the circ ID as your display field, and then you would transform that to a count, and then it's going to count the number of entries that have that data point on it. Count distinct is very similar, except that it counts how many distinct data points there are. And then max and min, I'm actually not entirely sure how those function. I think it allows you to look at a numeric, so Benjamin suggests minimum date as an example of that. So yeah, it would allow you to look at if there is sort of a string of dates or something else numeric like that, to only pull out the most recent one or only pull out the oldest one. So if you want to see what was the most recent time a specific, you're putting together a list of circulations, but you only want the most recent circulation for a title, not every time it's circulated, you could put in the min for that timestamp for that circulation. Similar to transforms are operators. Let's actually go in and put some transforms on, and then we'll come back to operators. So our existing display fields are down here. and it tells you what the field transforms are. Now, this is, of course, a cloned template, so it's already had some transforms applied. So you can see that the circulation date has already been transformed to year plus month, which means that we've taken that existing timestamp and we've sort of condensed it. So it's only going to give me the year and month. I can change this transform again by right-clicking on it and choosing Change Transform. And I could take this from year plus month to just date. And so I'm going to get the individual date, not just that generic year and month, but it's still not going to be that full timestamp. Now, this one, circulating library, is raw data. I can make that transform into, let's make it just all lowercase because it's going to be uppercase in the database. I can also, you can see that we've got the circulation data type ID has been transformed to count. So this is what gives us that circ count rather than a circ list, is that we've taken this ID data point and counted it. We've counted how many circulation IDs occurred within the parameters of the filters we set and within each of these categories that we've set. And then, of course, patron first name that we added when we created this template, or when we cloned this template, is raw data. I could come in here and I could change that transform to, let's say, just the first continuous non-subspace string. That way, if somebody's got a double first name, we won't see all of it. I can also move this field up, which I want to do because otherwise the count will be kind of thrown off. So transforms are basically how you want your data to display. It's not going to change the data. It's not going to do anything to filter it, but it is going to change the way it looks in your output. Operators actually change the filter. So that's what we're going to talk about next. Just a second to double check that we don't have anything in the chat. All right, so operators are how the data that you were pulling in your report compare to one another. And this is, I think, transforms stump some people. I think operators stump most people. So if you are confused by operators, you are not alone. I will do my best to illuminate them, but please ask questions. If you've run into something where an operator has caused you confusion, go ahead and put that example in the chat and we can go over it. There are a number of different operators. This is not the full list, but this is the most common list. So the biggest one, the sort of the default, is equals. So when you set up a filter, you would say this category equals, and then when you go into your report, you'd set your parameter and say what that category equals. So this category of circulation date equals October 2023. Or this category of circulating library equals PAC. That's your default, and that's what's going to happen automatically. However, that's not always what you want. Contains matching substrings. We talked about the concept of a substring where it pulls out just a piece of information from that data. You could ask to match only the substring. So this is where, you could determine that you want the filter to just filter on part of a longer name. If you have, maybe an author or something like that, you could filter on that, where you're just pulling out a piece of their name. Greater than or equal to, this is very commonly used. This is something you'll use a lot with dates. It may also be something that you use with, say, circulation counts. If you're trying to do a weeding report and you want a list of all items that have circulated less than 5 times this year, then, doing a less than operator is going to allow you to do that. So greater than and less than is very commonly used. In list is actually very commonly used as well. I'd say it's probably the operator I use the most, because this allows you to choose multiple options. And this is used almost entirely by me when I'm talking about filtering by library. So for those of you at a single branch system, you could do an equals and you'd be fine, because you could just say home library or circulating library equals, say Gibsonville. But for those of you that have a system with multiple branches and you're trying to run a report that looks at all of your branches, you need to use the enlist function for that. And this is going to be, if you're cloning off of a centralized report, that's already going to be set. If there is a library thing in there, if there is a single filter in there that looks at the library, it's almost certainly already going to be set to enlist, but double check it, because if you need to have multiple branches, it does need to be set to enlist. And this basically allows you to choose, instead of equals, it allows you to choose equals a whole bunch of things instead of equals one thing. And so I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Similarly, you can choose not enlist. So, if you're trying to run a report where you're pulling up books by shelving location and you want to see all your shelving locations except for like audiobooks, you could choose not enlist, and that would allow you to sort of exclude any shelving location that's for audiobooks while including everything else. Between is very helpful with dates again, because you could say that you would like to set your date parameter filter for any date between a start and an end point. So this would allow you to say that you want to see everything from, say, August 1st through October 31st, and then you get all of that data for those months in between those. This is really useful when you're doing fiscal year things, because of course the fiscal year doesn't match the calendar year. So you couldn't just say year equals 2023. You would say year is between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. And that would allow you to bring up your fiscal year data. Now, I will tell you that with the null and the null or blank, this causes problems sometimes. It doesn't cause problems all the time, and it can be really useful. But I have broken many reports by using null incorrectly. Basically, null means that there is not a data point listed for that column, and the data point that would be listed is numeric. Blank is only used on alphabetical, like text-based data. And if you try to apply blank or is null or blank to a fully numeric data point, it will break the report. It won't work. So just something to keep an eye out on. For the most part, this is not something you'll use a lot of, but a number of our centralized report templates do have this included, because it allows you to do things like, say, if you're running a holds report and you just want to look at holds that have already sort of gone through the process, then you might want to say that the capture date is not null. So for any of these, you can sort of change the transform to a certain extent. And so for the null, you could say that something is or is not null. And that can be really useful with some reports. A lot of our centralized report templates already have this included. If it's included, I'd recommend you don't mess with it, because we know it works. If you are building something from scratch or you're trying to add something, just be aware that if this is added to a data point that it doesn't work for, the report will break. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's the sort of the standard PSA with it, I guess. So let's look at these operators in actual practice, and hopefully that will clear it up a bit. So I'm going to come in here to the filters tab of my report. And we can see that we've got transforms applied to the filters. Transforms can apply to both displays and filters. But we also have operators. So under display field, there is not a column for operator. That only applies to filters. In each case, the operator is set to enlist. So we basically have a data type that is a timestamp that we're going to show as a year plus month. And we are going to do that in list. And we'll look at what that actually looks like on the other side of things in just a moment. You could do that. You could also switch this to, I'm going to change my operator from in list to, let's make this a less than. Oh, no, actually, let's make this a between. And then we have our circulating library, and that's in list, and I'm going to keep that way because I want to be able to choose multiple branches. And then we have the circulating, the modifier is set here. And so this is one of those times when the actual name is not super descriptive. So I could change my column documentation. Oh, that's for a hint, sorry. Yeah, so for this case, because it's filter, I could change my column documentation to say circ modifier. And so when I'm actually looking at the report, I'll get this hint letting me know that when I see the field for code, it's looking for circ modifier. And this one is also in list. So I'm going to get a list of all of the circ modifiers that could exist for this. And then I'm going to be able to choose whichever ones from that list I'd like. I could change this from in list to, let's do contains matching substring, and I'll show you how we can do that. So basically, your operator, if you do, when you add a filter, the operator is going to be set automatically to equals. And then you can just right click and change your operator to any of these options. With the is null or is not null, as I said, you can change these to being either an is null or an is not null. Is not null is probably used much more commonly than is null. And that's going to be useful for things like, a hold list or, a circulation list. You might want to have, if you're only looking at circulation transactions that have completed, as in the book has been returned, then you could have a return date is not null. So this is really useful. It's just one that I want to give you a caveat for when using. Now, if I wanted to add a new filter here, I'm going to come up here to circulation because that's my core source. So I always want to start there when trying to determine what to include. So I'm going to go into all of the options, all of the different column labels that could come up within this. And I'm going to choose due date. And then I can choose my transform immediately, and we'll put, we'll just do the date, and I'll add that. And you can see that, the data type is a timestamp, but the actual transform is date, so it's going to show up as an individual date. My operator is equals because that was the default, but I can change that to maybe is greater than. And so I can set up my operators in any way that makes sense for the type of data I'm looking at. Does that help people at least start to understand what we're talking about when we talk about operators? I know it's still, I want to look at it from the other side, but does this kind of get people on the right track, or are people more confused than they were before? All right, so let's actually go in and take a look at this. I'm going to save this template. And let's look at it from the other side. So we've set our operators, but now I want you to see what those look like when you go into add parameters. So I'm going to go into my template folder. I'm going to choose the template that we've cloned, and I'm going to create a new report from selected template. And down here in my filters, so the circulation library, this is what it looks like when you have an in-list operator. You get a box that has every option you could choose, and then you can just choose an option by clicking on it and click add. And then you can choose another option and click add, and you can do that for as many of them as you want. I would recommend that when you are doing every branch within your system, rather than choosing your system, choose every individual branch. And you can do that by just clicking on the top one, scrolling down to the bottom, clicking Shift on your keyboard, and clicking the bottom one. And that's going to highlight everything for you, and you can add them all at once. So we have that for both the circulation and for our circ modifier. The circ modifier, you can see that we have our hint is showing up here. So I know exactly what it is that I'm looking at with this particular filter. And I could choose audiobook as my substring. Now in this case, of course, because I don't have an in list, even though the box looks the same, I don't have this add option. So I can really only choose one of them. Let's choose book actually rather than audiobook, because if I do this, then I'm going to get in my final output, I'm going to get book, audiobook, ebook, possibly just those. Yep, just those three, but anything that has that substring of book in it, that little piece of the overall word. Then my circulation due date, I've chosen this to be a greater than. And for this, I can use a real date or a relative date. And we'll talk about that when we talk about recurrence in just a moment. But the real date, I can say that I would like my circulation due date to be greater than November 30th. And then we'll come back up here to my circulation checkout date. And this is the between operator. And it allows me to basically say anything that was checked out between November 1st and November 30th. Now, this would not be a terribly useful report because of all the modifications I've made to it, but it gives you an idea of some of the different options that are available. Now, before I can run this report, I do have to give it a name. So under here, report name, I'm just going to give it, I just copied the template name. Again, you can choose whatever type of naming convention you'd like. I do have to select my folder, so I'm going to do that. For this particular session, we're not going to get into pivot data at all. That is something that we may look at in a future session. But I'm going to choose training reports as my report folder and training reports as my output folder. I'm going to remove bar chart, and then I'm going to run it. So I'll save my report, my action succeeded. And now let's go to our output folder. And we can see that it is currently running. I have no idea if this is going to work or not with the changes I made to the operators. It should, but if it doesn't, we'll find out. Now you can sit here and wait for it. You can go do something else and come back to it. You can also wait for the email alert. If you sit here and wait for it, then you can refresh this page by clicking next or by changing your limit output. Either of those will refresh this. In this case, refreshing didn't do anything. It's still pending. So I'm going to let that kind of run in the background. So we've edited our template to change some transforms and some operators. Remember, this was a cloned template. So it existed within the centralized reports template folder. We cloned a copy of it, and then we changed a few things about what that template included so that our final report that we're running now is going to be a little bit different than a report that would have been run off of the original template. Let's talk about running reports. So we've run a report. We've actually run 2 reports at this point. What we haven't done is set up recurrence. So that's the main thing we'll talk about now, because I do think that that's probably the last thing that people are confused about at this level of reporting. So why are templates and reports separate? So the template basically asks the question, what data should be pulled? The report answers that question. So when you create a template or you clone a template, you're deciding which questions to ask. You're saying, I'm going to ask which libraries these circulations happened at. I'm going to ask which dates these circulations happened between. And then when you run the report, you say, well, these circulations happened at PAC, and these circulations happened between November 1st and November 30th. So you're creating the questions when you create the template, and you're creating the answers when you create the report. And then your output will actually give you the data. I don't know why Evergreen chose to do it that way, but that is how it works. The simple reporter does combine the template and the report step. So that's one reason it's simpler. And we will do a session on the simpler reporter later this year. When you're setting up a report, you can run multiple reports off a single template. So you can run a report every day if you want to off of the same template. You don't have to go back in and change your template every time and clone a new one. You create a template once, and then you can run as many reports as you need to. The main thing you're doing when you're setting up the report is setting the parameters for your filters, but you're also choosing your output. So we talked about output a little bit in the HTML Excel bar chart question. As I said, I recommend HTML and Excel, but I don't recommend the bar chart. If you're emailing yourself these reports and you're never going to be going and looking at the output, you can skip the HTML as well. You can just do it as Excel. I do the HTML myself as just sort of when I'm trying to create a new report, and I'm not sure what's going to happen, HTML is useful for me because I can get a quick glimpse before downloading the Excel. You can also determine if you want it to run immediately or at a designated time in the future. And of course, you can put in your email address so that that output will be emailed to you. Some things to keep in mind when setting up Recurrence. The dates can get tricky. When you are doing a recurring report, you want to make sure you are setting relative dates. If you set real dates, then every time you run that report, every time it recurs, you will get the same output. If you say the first time you set it up that you want it to run October 1st through October 31st, then the first time it runs, it'll do that, but that will also happen the next time it runs and the next time. So you want to set up your relative dates for that, and I'll show you how to do that. You set your runtime. Do not make it run immediately unless you were setting it up on, if it's a monthly report, if you're setting it up for the first time on the 1st of the month or the 30th of the previous month, you can have it set to run immediately, and then it will recur on whatever schedule you set after that. But the way you set up Recurrence is basically monthly or weekly. So it will run exactly 1 month or exactly 1 week from the date of the first running. So if you run it immediately and that's not the first of the month, then you're always going to get kind of a mid-month report. You can also set up multiple recipients. So let's actually take a look at this. I'm going to come back in. Let's see if this is finished yet. Still going. I'm going to come back in to run a report off the same template we were just working on. So the count circulations. And I'm just going to create a new report from the selected template. And this time I'm going to set it up to be a recurring report. Last time I set it up to just run once. This time I'm going to do it to run monthly. So the first thing I'm going to do is change my circulation dates to from a real date to a relative date. So if I have real date, then I can select, November 1st through November 30th. For a relative date, I'm going to choose it to start 1 month ago, or I could choose it to start 6 months ago. I can choose however I'd like it to start. And because this is a between, then I think what I'm going to do is say that I want it to start 2 months ago and move to 1 month ago. So it's going to give me that sort of that range. Everything else I'll do the same down here. So I would choose the same. I'm just going to choose one branch this time, but I could choose the same branches. I could choose the same circ modifiers. And my circulation due date and time, again, I'm going to make this relative. So I'm going to say that I want this to be up until 1 day ago. And that will make it so that it always cuts it off the day before the report runs. Then I'm going to come down here to my recurrence. And so this is this last little part that we've sort of ignored up until now. The first thing I need to do is check recurring report. The next thing I need to do is determine how often I want this to run. I can do it by days, weeks, or months. So I could have a report that runs daily or every 3 days or every 5 days. If I wanted it to be sort of fortnightly, I could choose every 14 days. I can choose it to go weekly. So once a week, every 6 weeks, whatever works for me. And then I think the most common is that people will run it monthly. So I change it to month, and I could have it run every month. I could have it run every 6 months. You know, even if I have a report that I only need every 2 years, I can go up to 24 months. That's as far as I can go with recurrence. I cannot imagine setting up a recurring report that you need to run that infrequently. At that point, I think you probably just run it as you need it. But you can go up to 24 months. So in this case, I'm just going to set it to 1. I'd say that is probably most common, though, of course, with any sort of annual data, a lot of people will set that up to 12 months. So that's an option as well. But I'm going to choose 1. And so basically every month this report will run. When it does, it will look at the previous, the data from 2 months ago through 1 month ago, and a due date from 1 day before it runs. Now, the other thing that I said to be aware of is that you want to change when it runs to stop, instead of going run as soon as possible. You want to switch this to a specific date, and you would want to make it either the last day of the month that you're in or the first day of the next month, depending on if this is a report that you want running on the last day of the month or the first day. I would recommend, if it doesn't matter that much, to always do the first day, because if I set this to run on November 30th, that's great for November and for September and everything. It's not so good in December, when I'm going to basically lose a day. So I would recommend, generally speaking, unless there is a reason not to do it on the first of the month, to always do it on the first of the following month. Now, if you would like to test this and basically get your data as quickly as possible so that you can make sure that the data is correct, I would recommend you do a non-recurring report. Just set it up to run once to check it, to make sure that you're getting the data you expect. And if that's correct, come back in and set up a recurring report, rather than trying to run as soon as possible thing, because once you set up that recurrence, it's kind of a pain to try to change it. So if you want to test a single report, once you've determined it's correct, go back in, run another report, and set recurrence on that one. That's a good question, Robert. So Robert asked in the chat, if you set a monthly report to run on the 31st, would it only run in months with 31 days? And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I don't know if Benjamin knows or if somebody else in here knows. I've never tried it, so I'm not sure. But I'd be more than happy to give that a shot and let you know what happens. Yeah, we'll test that out, and we will. I'll post that in the Basecamp thread for this session, because I am curious about that. All right, so at this point, I have my recurrence set up the way I'd like it to. I still need to choose my output folder. I still need to choose my report folder. In this case, you'll see that my report name has already been added in here. That's because I've already run a report off this template on this workstation, so it kind of remembered that. But if I tried to run this again without changing that, it would not work. There's already a report in this folder with the given name. So you're going to get that happening occasionally. It's not, unless you run lots of reports, it probably won't be that common, but it may happen occasionally. If it does, all you have to do is come in and change it. So in this case, I'm going to make it 1.2. That's why I do that at 1 point whatever, so that when I create a template, I can run multiple different versions off that same template while I'm testing things out to figure out exactly which one works. So we got a question about creating a report recounting the number of books circulated in a specific genre. That is possible. Circ modifiers would not be a way to do that. You would have to work off of probably within the cataloging table. That's a tricky one. It's possible. We'll take a look at it. Let me get this set up to run, and we'll kind of go back and see. So shelving locations, if you have separate shelving locations for your genres, that's the easiest way to do it, I think. Yeah, Courtney says that she thinks it's only going to run in months with 31 days, and I think she's probably right. Knowing how Evergreen works, that seems likely. But we'll take a look. So if we go in, I'm just going to go and create a new template real quick. Or the core source of circulation. I think if we go to a subtable of circulating item, so we're going to have to do a sub of the subtable. So I'm going to click on the arrow next to circulating item, and I'm going to come down to shelving location. And then I could put shelving location in as a filter and change my operator to in list. And then when I run my report, I can choose the shelving locations that match the genre that I have in mind. Now, if you genreify beyond the shelving locations, you could run a report, but it would, the filter that you apply would change based on how you designate those genres in the catalog. So if you do it with, say, a call number, prefix, or suffix, then that would be what you would put in as your filter. Is that call number, suffix, or prefix, or whatever it is you're using. So it would depend on how you catalog them. If you just use the shelving locations as your determinant for genre, then this is how you would do it. If you go more complex than just the shelving location, then it would depend on how you designate that when you catalog them. But it's possible. And if that's something that you would like to do and you go beyond shelving location for it, you can submit a ticket and we can help you put that together. Yeah, Benjamin's saying that subject headings is not the way to go. And because, a book that has 3 different subject headings can, things would show up multiple times. Anytime I've tried to do subject headings within a report, it gets very messy. So yeah, definitely my first thought was not the right one on this one, which is why I usually go up to 10 or 11 different attempts when I'm creating a new report. All right. Any questions about recurrence or other questions about kind of what we've talked about so far? So we are at 2 minutes over, but if people do have remaining questions, I'm happy to hang out for as long as needed to answer those. As I said at the beginning, this is the first in multiple different reporter training sessions. So my hope is that we can go into more detail on some of this stuff in future sessions. But this is at least kind of a start, and maybe hopefully we'll give you a baseline for working with the existing templates. And if there are additional things that you'd like to see covered in future sessions, feel free to email me or put it in Basecamp, and we'll definitely make sure that it gets covered. Yes, Heidi, you asked if this will be archived. I will work on getting the video processed as quickly as I can. Processing usually does take a little while because I've got to get the captions together. But as soon as I can get it processed, I will post it on Basecamp. I will email it to everybody who registered, and it will also go up on our YouTube channel. So it will be available from multiple different places. Well, I want to thank everybody for being here and participating. If you do have questions building off of this that you'd like to ask in Basecamp, please feel free to. I'm happy to, I'll keep an eye on that thread, and I'm happy to discuss any of this in further detail. I don't know everything about reports, but I am excited to learn. If you ask me questions that stump me, that will just give me something to learn. So I like that. But I appreciate everybody being here, and I hope to see you all again when we do our next session. reports. And Benjamin put in the chat a link to join the Basecamp group for reports. There is a Basecamp group specifically for reports, and that is always a great place for discussion and help from lots of people who know lots about reports. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the session, but I'm excited to hear more from everybody. Thanks.